What if the moment you thought was your end was actually your beginning? In 1956, a man fell from a construction scaffold in southern Italy, and in the seconds between the fall and the ground, Padre Pio saw something that would change how we understand mercy forever. Tonight, I want to share with you 3 moments that reveal the terrifying beauty of God's final offer, and why the prayers you're saying right now might be answering a cry you won't hear for decades. The scaffolding gave way at 3:47 in the afternoon. Giuseppe Torini, a man who hadn't prayed in 32 years, felt the wood snap beneath his boots, and for one infinite second he was weightless. The construction site below him blurred into a watercolor of cement and sky. The sun hung low and orange, casting long shadows across the half-finished building. Workers' voices became distant echoes, stretching and distorting like sound through water. He didn't scream. There wasn't time. His arms windmilled uselessly, grasping at air that offered nothing, at space that had no mercy. The smell of sawdust and wet concrete filled his nostrils one last time. But in that stretched moment, something in his chest tore open, not from fear but from recognition. He had felt this before. This hollow freefall, this terror of approaching something final and unmovable. Not the physical sensation, but something deeper, older, buried beneath decades of deliberate forgetting. It was the same emptiness he'd felt standing at his wife's grave, refusing to pray. The same void that opened up in the middle of the night when sleep wouldn't come and the silence pressed too close. He'd been falling his whole life. He just hadn't noticed until now. Time folded. The ground rushed up, eager and patient. His heart hammered 4 times, 4 final drumbeats marking the end of everything he'd built, everything he'd ignored, everything he'd run from. And 200 miles away, in a dim confessional in San Giovanni Rotondo, Padre Pio suddenly gasped and gripped the wooden lattice so hard his stigmata blood fresh through the bandages. The sacred wounds on his palms opened like mouths crying out. "He's falling," the priest whispered, his voice breaking with urgency and sorrow. "And he has 1 second left to choose." The penitent on the other side held his breath, watching the holy man tremble. But what was Giuseppe choosing between? And how could a man falling to his death still have a choice at all? Giuseppe didn't hit the ground. Not yet. Instead, the air around him thickened, became almost liquid, and suddenly he wasn't falling anymore. The wind stopped. The noise stopped. Everything stopped. He was standing in his childhood kitchen. The smell of his mother's bread, rosemary and olive oil, the crust golden and cracking, filled the small room. Afternoon light poured through the window in dusty shafts. The smell of his mother's bread. The chipped blue paint on the cupboard door, the same paint that had been there for decades, peeling at the corner where he used to pick at it with his fingernail. He was 7 years old again, kneeling beside his bed, hands folded. His mother's voice soft and rhythmic. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death." Her hand rested on his small shoulder, warm and certain. He could feel the texture of the wool blanket beneath his knees. The memory was so vivid it hurt. He wanted to stay there forever. Then it shattered like glass. He was 23 in a trench during the war, mud thick as tar, the smell of cordite and death everywhere. Rosary beads tangled in his fist, the cheap metal crucifix cutting into his palm, whispering promises to God he would never keep. "If you let me live, I'll never forget you. I swear it. I swear." Shells screamed overhead, men died beside him. And God let him live. The scene dissolved like smoke. He was 35, standing at his daughter's baptism, candles flickering, priest's voice droning in Latin, and he felt nothing, just impatience, just the weight of obligation. He checked his watch twice. He wanted visions accelerated. 1,000 moments. 1,000,000 choices. His wife begging him to come to Mass. His mother's funeral. He didn't cry. A crucifix on the wall he walked past every single day without seeing. Every time he had turned away. Every door he had closed, every prayer he had mocked with silence. "No," Giuseppe heard himself say, though his lips weren't moving. "No, this isn't. I didn't mean." But the truth was assembling itself, piece by piece, and it was made of his own hands. Then the vision stopped. Giuseppe stood in a place without walls, a vast, breathing darkness that somehow wasn't empty. It pulsed, it lived, it watched. He could feel the weight of something colossal turning toward him. Something that knew every thought he'd ever had, every fantasy, every buried resentment, every moment of secret pride, and he understood with a clarity that was almost unbearable that he was being seen, not judged by a distant gavel, but known completely, utterly, without mercy and without lies, every secret, every lie, every moment of cruelty he'd justified with excuses that sounded so reasonable at the time, every person he'd wounded and forgotten. Their faces flashed before him now, each one a small accusation he couldn't refute. His daughter waiting for him to say he loved her. His wife dying slowly of loneliness beside him. The beggar he'd stepped over outside the church. The co-worker he'd destroyed with gossip. They were all here woven into the fabric of this darkness, silent witnesses to the man he'd really been. The darkness wasn't hostile. That was the worst part. It wasn't angry. It wasn't vengeful. It was simply true. It reflected back everything he'd spent 32 years trying not to see. "I can't," he stammered, his voice small and childlike in the vastness. "I didn't know it would feel like this." And then a voice, not from outside but from within the fabric of everything, from the darkness itself, from the foundation of existence. "You knew. I called you 1,000 times. You pretended not to hear." The words weren't harsh. They were sad, infinitely sad. The sadness of a father watching his son choose ruin. Giuseppe felt his knees buckle, but there was no ground to fall to. He was suspended in truth, and truth had weight. The weight of his life pressed down on him, not as punishment, but as reality. Consequence without costume. He had spent 3 decades building a kingdom of distractions, and now, in this place outside of time, the distractions were gone. The television was silent. The work was finished. The noise had stopped. There was only Giuseppe and God, and the question that would decide everything: would he still turn away? For the first time in 32 years, Giuseppe wanted to pray. The desire rose up from somewhere deep, somewhere he thought had died long ago. But the words wouldn't come. His throat was tight. His mouth opened and closed uselessly, like a fish drowning in air. His pride, thick and ancient, coiled around his chest like iron bands. It had protected him for so long, this pride. It had kept him from kneeling, from admitting need, from looking weak in front of other men. And now, when he needed words most desperately, pride held his tongue like a vice. "I don't deserve this," he thought. And that was true. He didn't. He deserved the darkness. He deserved the weight. He deserved to fall alone into whatever waited below. Every rational part of him knew this. But somewhere impossibly far away and impossibly close, he heard another voice. A woman's voice, soft, familiar, threading through the void like a lifeline thrown across an impossible distance. His mother, she was praying. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death." The words were faint but clear, spoken with the same gentle rhythm he remembered from childhood. The prayer she'd said over him when he was 7. The prayer he'd buried under decades of silence, under noise and work and deliberate forgetting. And now it was reaching him, threading through the darkness like a single strand of light, thin but unbreakable, glowing with a warmth that didn't belong in this cold place. "How?" he whispered, and his voice cracked. "She's been dead for 20 years. 20 years in the ground. 20 years of silence. How could she still be praying?" The answer came not in words, but in understanding, in knowledge that bypassed his mind and went straight to his heart. Prayer is not bound by time. The Hail Mary she prayed for you at 7, she prayed it for you at 49. She prayed it for this exact moment. Every prayer she'd ever whispered over him, tucking him in, watching him leave for war, dying in her hospital bed, still whispering his name. Every prayer was here now, alive and reaching. The iron bands around his chest cracked, just slightly, just enough. Giuseppe opened his mouth, and the words that came out were broken, childlike, desperate. "Mary, I'm sorry. I forgot everything. Please." His voice was the voice of a 7-year-old boy kneeling beside his bed, all the sophistication stripped away, all the pride shattered. Just a son crying out for his mother. Just a soul reaching for the only hand that had never stopped reaching back. The darkness shuddered. The vast, breathing void trembled like a curtain caught in wind. And suddenly she was there, not as a vision, but as a presence, warm, overwhelming, utterly real, more real than the scaffolding had been. More solid than the ground rushing up to meet him. The Mother of God standing between Giuseppe and the weight of his own choices. Her blue mantle rippled though there was no wind. Light radiated from her, not harsh but gentle, the kind of light that heals instead of burns. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes held everything: sorrow for his wasted years, deep and ancient as the sea, joy that he had finally turned, brilliant and immediate as sunrise, and something else something fierce and protective, the look of a mother standing between her child and anything that would dare to harm him. She was both infinitely gentle and infinitely strong. She reached out, and in her hand was a thin, glowing thread. It pulsed with golden light, humming with a frequency Giuseppe could feel in his bones. The thread of every prayer ever said for him. His mother's Hail Marys whispered over his crib and his childhood bed. A stranger's rosary at morning mass, prayed for all the souls who need it most. A child's bedtime whisper 50 years in the future for a grandfather she'd never met. All of them woven together, pulled taut across eternity, stronger than steel, brighter than any star. "Take it," she said, not with her voice, with everything, with her eyes, with the tilt of her head, with the very fabric of existence bending toward mercy. Giuseppe reached out, and the moment his fingers touched the thread, the darkness exploded into light. He was falling again, the ground 3 feet away, his body about to shatter, but he was not alone anymore, and in the final heartbeat before impact, he smiled. Padre Pio lurched forward in the confessional, tears streaming down his face, and the penitent on the other side froze in confusion. The holy man's entire body shook, his bandaged hands trembled against the lattice. "Father, are you?" The penitent started, voice tight with concern. "He made it," Padre Pio whispered, trembling, his voice breaking with relief and wonder. "Gesù mio, he made it." 1 second was enough. He wept openly now, tears of joy falling onto his habit, his stigmata throbbing with a pain that felt like love. Later that evening, a telegram arrived from a hospital 200 miles south. Giuseppe Torini had fallen 4 stories, fractured spine, shattered pelvis, massive internal bleeding. But he was alive. Barely, the doctors couldn't explain it. By every medical calculation, he should have died on impact. And when the nurses leaned close to hear his labored breathing, they heard him whispering the same words over and over, "Holy Mary, Mother of God, thank you, thank you." His lips barely moved. His body was broken, but his voice never stopped praying. He lived for 3 more days, long enough to ask for a priest, long enough to confess 32 years in 1 raw, unbroken hour, the words spilling out between gasps of pain and morphine, long enough to receive the Eucharist with tears running into his oxygen mask, the host placed gently on his tongue by a young priest who would remember this moment for the rest of his life. And when he finally died, Padre Pio said this: "He fell 4 stories and landed in the arms of his mother. Not the mother who gave him birth, but the mother who gave him eternity. And that fall saved him." You might be wondering how a single second could undo 32 years of silence, how one desperate cry could outweigh 3 decades of deliberate turning away. But that's the mystery Padre Pio saw so clearly. Grace doesn't operate on our timeline, it doesn't follow our logic, it doesn't measure the way we measure. The Hail Mary you pray tonight, the one that feels small, routine, almost pointless, that prayer is traveling forward into the future, backward into the past, sideways into moments you'll never see. It's reaching the man who will fall tomorrow, the woman who will die alone next year, the child who will lose faith in 10 years and find it again in 20. Your prayers are threads, thin, glowing, unbreakable threads cast into eternity. And Mary, treasure of all graces as the saints call her, she is weaving them into ropes, ropes strong enough to pull souls back from the edge of forever. Giuseppe's mother didn't know that her bedtime Hail Marys would save her son 4 decades later, 3 seconds before his death. She didn't see the future. She didn't understand the mechanics of grace. She just prayed, she trusted, and the prayer waited, patient and luminous, stored in the treasury of heaven, until the exact moment it was needed. That's the truth Padre Pio saw in the confessional that day. God wastes nothing. Every prayer is stored. Every tear is kept in his bottle. Every act of love echoes in eternity until it finds the soul it was meant to save. Nothing is lost, nothing is forgotten. Every whispered Hail Mary is ammunition in the war for souls. So tonight, before you sleep, I want you to do something. Pray 1 Hail Mary, just 1. But pray it for someone you'll never meet, someone who is falling right now. Someone who has 32 years of silence wrapped around their heart and 1 second left to choose. Pray it slowly, mean every word. Let each phrase settle in your heart before moving to the next, and trust that Mary, who stood at the foot of the cross and refused to abandon her son, even when the sky went dark and the earth shook, will take that prayer and carry it exactly where it needs to go, across time, across death, into the space between the fall and the ground, because that's where mercy lives, in the final second, in the space we thought was empty, in the moment we thought was too late. It's never too late. Not while there's still one breath. Not while there's still one prayer. Not while Mary still stands between us and the weight of our own choices, holding the thread, whispering, "Take it. Take it. You are not alone." Giuseppe fell 4 stories and found heaven in the last second, not because he deserved it, but because someone somewhere had prayed.